How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Agave and Cactus Talk. Today we'll be talking about how agave is used as a building material. I got this question from someone, and I thought it'd be good to make into a podcast, right? So I wanted to kind of talk about, the general layout of a building, and then what portions agave could be involved in or replaced, So when you really think of, just imagine a square, simple building, not too complicated. You got your floor, you got your structural beams, your side walls, exterior, side interior wall and exterior walls. You got your roof, and you got maybe some doors, right? So kind of just picture like a square garage or something, right? And agave could be involved in most of these, portions of the building. I don't know every way that agave is used around the world for building, but I know enough ways that, I can kind of tell you a little bit about them, and that way maybe you want to try a different use of agave for building. So we'll start, I guess, from the ground up here. And the first thing, if I was building a shed, I'd lay I build my shed's post frame. So put all the structural beams first in concrete, and usually that's going to be steel or wood. And agave can replace some of these materials because, if you have all these posts going into, say, 3 feet by 3 feet column of concrete, a lot of that concrete most of the time doesn't have very much rebar, or it doesn't have reinforcement. So you can utilize agave fibers that are dried and cured as a reinforcement, much like geotextile does on, say, a retainer wall, or a hill project where they're putting geotextile down and putting or going up every foot of soil and putting another thing of geotextile. So it can even help in not only the column pouring, strengthening the concrete, but it could also be a geotextile, say, on the portion surrounding the house, and reinforce, if you have a sloped hill, that you may want to reinforce that hillside so that if in case of a landslide or in case of high rains, it's not just eroding all the way. Geotextiles used a lot in land development to stabilize soils and hills and valleys, all types of stuff like that. So on the outside of the home, it could stabilize soils by being used as a geotextile fabric, and then in the actual foundation concrete, it could strengthen the concrete. Now, I told you out of that concrete foundation, it usually have steel or wood beams that are going to form the structure of that building. Well, even those could be, if they're concrete formed, reinforced with, agave fiber. You could even utilize some of the completely dried stalks, kind of as a rebar, because they're straight fiber. And much like fiber rebar that's coming out a lot, right? And it's being a replacement to the steel rebar. You could utilize on, structures, agave as a reinforcement, not only the fiber, so the actual stock. A lot of these studies need to be improved and expanded to see how much strength is added or unadded, right? Because say you're losing 10% of structural stability, but you are saving yourself 20% by using agave fiber reinforcement and stocks. Like there's real economics behind lots of that stuff for builders. So it may be that one day we see a lot of the fiber reinforcement coming into agave start to be, or into concrete start to be agave fiber. So that, is the beams. And here's where it gets kind of interesting too, because a lot of the dried stocks are very, water resistant, and they're very tough. And I've thought forever that these would make perfect, wooden floor planks, right? Because you could cut them off of the stock and form these small strips that you could lay as flooring, essentially. And it would be very similar to like a bamboo floor. But on the actual beam, getting back to the beam, the structural beam, this would be interesting because now we have, woods that are customized, right? So if you want a certain sized beam that's, say, super long, they may be pressing various sheets of wood together, right, to create a solid piece. And they use various presses and glues and, different stuff to make this a solid piece. Like, think about how plywood is, right? Like, a lot of the plywood is just, the scraps, and they're pressing it together and using some chemicals and curing processes to make your plywood, right? You see this 4-foot by 8-foot plywood or a sheet of wood, but it really was like thousands of little wood particles, put together. So you could do something very similar with agave fiber, especially from the stalk, which is, I would say, the toughest portion. They're much more tougher fiber than the leaves, and you could utilize that to create, with enough ingenuity, I believe, some wooden post, much like a 4x4 or a 6x6 by 8-foot post. And I think it would be a lot more water resistant than a lot of the wood varieties out on the market right now. Like, most of what people build houses with is really young pine trees. Pine trees that are mainly coming from forests that are planted and grown specifically for that. So they're very fast growing pine trees that aren't as dense of a wood. They're very, not dense like old timbers. A lot of the redwood and stuff like that. They're just much better quality woods than what's on the market today. And that's why you see a lot of new homes, for instance, with the newer wood being built, that they're not even getting 30, 40 years. Meanwhile, I'll give an example of the wood used in my home in Altadena. It was very good wood, very dense trees used and cut for that wood. And, 100 years later, 120 years later, it was still standing and very well conditioned without a crazy amount of repair. You see that in a lot of these communities, the wood lasting 100, 200 years, but it's a different type of wood, But back to the point that agave could probably make lots of these structural, beams, right? And they wouldn't be from a solid piece, but, they could still be manufactured. Now, let's say the equivalent of a 2x4 could also probably be coming from very large agave stocks, like an agave americana. Once it's dried and cured, you can definitely use each stock to get, studs or structural wood. That's a 2x4. Most people don't really know that 2x4, which is a 2-inch by 4-inch by 8-foot pole or piece of wood, Most of those are 1.5 by 3.5 inch, and many of them aren't even 8 feet. They're like 7 foot 8, 92 instead of 96 inches. For various reasons, but anyways, like a lot of people think they're cheating us, but it's just like, the extra 0.5 a lot of the times is that plywood. So it's just, they made the wood smaller, kind of so that they could reproduce, homes quicker, and it would fit a lot easier and use less wood. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're better homes. They just made them easier for the contractor to build, and that's kind of why they're lower quality. But yeah, the 2x4s could be created out of pressed agave fiber and stalks, and I think that you would still get some pretty good wood. Maybe it won't be as structurally stable to build multiple stories or to build, let's say, really complicated structures, but for say a shed, a garage, or something that maybe is not a dwelling, this could be definitely a resource that's used very well. And the larger the agave, usually the larger stalk and the larger amount of it's kind of like a tree trunk, right? So the tree trunk, they only get the center of it to get all those pieces of wood that we use for our home. Kind of similar with the agave stalk. If it begins to be used in this way, while it might be 8 inches wide, after it's dried, it may only get one stud out of each flower or two, right? So it will be interesting. But anyways, yeah, you could build, quote unquote wooden studs out of the agave. Also, you could utilize, now say we've put our foundation, we've put the studs for a floor, and we've put the studs on the wall, and we got agave. Just in this theory of a home, we have agave planks as flooring, agave fiber reinforcing the concrete foundation. We have agave stalks serving as studs, and we have maybe lots of strong agave fiber pressed together to form structural beams. Well, the actual wall itself could be agave as well, and a mix of earthen materials, right? So you can use agave fiber much like you would straw and build an adobe version, I guess, of this would kind of be, I'm not sure what the name would be, to be honest with you, because I'm not sure if the adobe changes based on what materials you're using, right? But anyways, what I'm getting at is that you could use a lot of the agave fiber in between studs, even if they're wood or steel, or say you did agave, and then much like you would use straw, and then you can plaster clay on top of that and create a wall that's going to be fire resistant and be a earthen wall, and that wall is going to serve the purpose of keeping a lot of the heat out in the summer, and keeping some heat in the winter, because it's not going to allow the thermodynamics of the building to sway as easily with the seasons, especially if you make it, I would say, more than 4 to 6 inches thick. The thicker you can make that agave adobe, the cooler your building would be, and the I guess warmer in the winter, right? So the interesting part behind that is that already have seen this done in person a little bit in Mexico, and I know that for instance today they're building a lot of what they call eco bricks out of agave bagasse, but I, to be honest with you, think that a lot of the quality of fiber is lost during the distillation processes and production. So I'm not such a fan of what do you call it? Those eco bricks, because they're lower quality fiber, and you know, I like that they're being used so that this isn't just spread in the fields and you get all types of nasty chemicals in your fields and stuff, right? But I think that there is a better quality of brick that will be produced from fiber that is dried and cured specifically for the purpose of being pressed into bricks, instead of creating the bricks from waste products like that, you know. But who knows? You'd probably have to do a study to compare the strength of them. But that's just, you know, my theory on that. But still a good process, using a waste and turning it into a natural building material. And you can definitely utilize the agave leaf fibers and stock fibers to create something like that, right? Create lots of freestanding bricks, and you can utilize those to build after, or you could do the Adobe method and just directly form and build with it. So that could be also, you know, a floor, it could be a sidewall, on the interior, it could be an exterior sidewall, you know, it could even be, you know, the I forget the name for it, but you know, the space or the ceiling, you know, it could be your ceiling, much like you would have a drywall, right? The only difference is that drywall, it's pretty horrible, you know. I mean, it gets wet once and you got mold and lots of other issues. Whereas you're not going to have that issue with an agave Adobe combo, or even just an Adobe combo. Also now, think about the roof of a building, right? So the roof of a building, many times you're going to lay down wooden or steel studs, and you know, a lot of these stocks, my grandpa would tell me all the time about how, you know, these larger agave produced really strong stocks, and they would use that for roof beams and structural beams for the actual building, like much like a 2x4 as a stud. So these stocks provided a lot of building material for people to build their little structures out of, right? But mainly he told me that they were used for roofing, because a lot of the structure itself was earthen, you know. And on the roof, they would place them much like a 2x4, tie them in with agave fiber to the building itself. And then they would lay, for instance, palm fronds or large leaves on top to form kind of like a straw roof does, a layer, or a shingle roof, a layer where the water is just, you know, sloped and cascading off the roof. And a lot of the material, sometimes when they didn't have palm fronds, they would actually use the really long agave leaves, like, you know, sometimes 5-6 foot plus agave leaves. So, you know, they would use those kind of in a you know, in a shingle formation to allow, you know, the water from the top of the roof to drain all the way down, right? Now, there's lots of other ways. That's like kind of the, I would say, main kind of just layout of the building, right? But there's lots of other ways that agave could be used in building. And my goal is to kind of just, you know, give you a little primer, I guess. You know, obviously, if you can make bricks out of them in Adobe, then you can make all types of, you know, stoves, fireplaces. You can make, you know, areas where you are welding, you know, that you need to have the walls and the floor fire resistant or fireproof. You could use it for those instances. You know, I guess an honorable mention here is that if you do have slopes, like I was talking about, or you live in like a little valley, you might want to use agave for erosion control, you know. And a dry farmed agave many times will be putting out several feet of roots over a few years and establishing itself to not allow that hillside to erode. So that can also help, much like I was saying with the geotextile that could possibly be made out of agave. It could be, a way to stabilize the soils around you in your farm or your house. And I definitely here in the future of the farm want to build a couple pins out of agave products, like using the stalks and the fiber. And I'm going to do combinations. I think the next one that I'm going to try is making a cinder block goat pin, goose pin, and then that pin covering it with agave fiber and clay mixed together to form a adobe that will keep the goats cooler in summer and warmer in winter, right? That's a pretty chill one. I'm also, as I've repeated in several of my podcasts, planting them alongside my fence line to serve as a privacy fence, a security fence, and a pest fence, right? So it prevents a lot of the coyotes from jumping in, the humans from jumping in and trying to jack my shit. And it also serves as a wind barrier, and it serves as a fire break. Lots of things like that. So even on the landscaping side of building, agave could be very useful for a home or a farm in securing it. I will also mention that the agave stalks make perfect replacements for tree stakes and for shade tarp, framing. So, for instance, I'll utilize to keep a tree straight or a columnar cactus an agave stalk and tie it to the stalk. And then I'll also utilize these stalks to prop up shade structures. So, I can readily deploy them in an area and use them as I'd use a bamboo or a T-post stake to basically tie my shade tarp to, or whatever shading structure I have, like a frost tarp or, freeze tarps, and protect my plants further, give them extra shade in the summer, extra protection from the wind and the cold in the winter. Lots of different uses for those stalks in the building of things around the farm, right? They could also be used, now that I'm talking about the farm here, as stakes, the agave stalks, as fencing stakes. So you can put them in the ground once they're dry and then utilize them much like you would use a wooden tree stake or anything like that to tie fencing to, or tie barbed wire, or tie steel wire to, whatever you're using to keep your animals in or out, whatever. And the same thing, they could be used for braces and horizontal reinforcement on those fences. Now, in this podcast, I had a hard time trying to stay away from agave textile uses because I know a lot of ways that I would consider building that fall into the textile kind of use, you know what I mean? But in this case, I was just trying to deal with particularly the ways that I see I can use agave for building, and I've seen agave used for building. So I'm sure there's lots more ways that we'll talk about in the future probably. But just wanted to give you guys a quick primer. What are we at right now? 24 minutes on agave and its use in building materials. And there's lots of cool studies on agave americana in specific, and its fibers being used to strengthen concrete, especially non-structural concrete and stuff. And I think there's a lot of potential for it. They're talking about using it in that study as a concrete filler, you could say, right? So in between block walls, or in between stones and stuff, as a mortar base. It can serve that purpose as well, and I'm sure we'll start seeing it a lot more as people want to have more carbon capture in their building projects, or use alternative materials that are more sustainable and stuff. And You know, I guess probably should have mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but many of the ways that agave is being utilized for building are directly coming from usages of bamboo, a lot of them. So if it's not a way that indigenous people across the Americas utilized agave to build, many of the new versions of how they're using it to build, like for plank flooring, for instance, are coming from, in my opinion, how clients are today using hemp and bamboo. So I give the example. I never heard about agavecrete, which is agave concrete mixes, being utilized for siding until I heard about hempcrete, right? And once people realized you could do it with hemp, they said, hey, you could probably do this with agave, right? So that's the interesting part there. And the same thing with bamboo planks, right? Once someone said, hey, you can make cool bamboo plank flooring and it sells for a great price, then someone thought to do it out of agave. But, you know, it's still not mainstream and there's not really products you can buy of it. But one day there will be, and just like those hemp insulation products that are rivaling rock wool today, or, you know, that's the other thing, right? So it's like, we can learn a lot from those other two industries. So hempcrete, for instance, provides really, really good insulation for thermodynamics, really high R values. You know what that is if you're a builder. And it also, you know, it's very, you know, it repels a lot of water, right? So it's not like drywall that it tends to, whatever water that sticks to it, really want to absorb it, right? But what was I getting at? Because they're using this, you know, bamboo insulation, right? Then I'm over here in my head like, oh, well, agave and many fiber qualities or traits, you could say, is beating out agave in my book. So if it's serving as a great insulator on buildings, then agave is going to do the same thing, if not better, right? And it's not to knock any of those industries like bamboo or hemp. They're great natural alternative natural building materials, and agave is just one of those, right? Here's the grand problem with a lot of you know, our global systems, right? They focus too much once something works they focus too much on one way, right? So it's like, once we saw coal or oil or petroleum could be like amazing energy production, we just threw everything into it, right? And then you have all these problems. And look at now how they're trying to make solar go up a lot, right? And there's lots of issues with large-scale solar installations, destroying ecosystems and fuck birds like crazy. All these different things, right? Like, look at the Ivanhoe, I don't know how the fuck you pronounce it, project. $2 billion to destroy an ecosystem, and now they want to take it out, right? But point being, when you invest too much in one building material, or one energy material, or one any material, that material inherently people try to find scale and how to do it the most efficient. And many of the times that is, you know, the things that hurt people and environment and, you know, a lot of shit. So the point being here that, you know, it's better for a building economy to have wood, bamboo, agave, hemp, you know, name your other half dozen great alternative building materials than to just have wood. You get me? And that's the problem, right? So it's like, look at green energy. If we got geothermal, solar, wind, hydro, if we got like, you know, wind energy, we got fucking ocean energy, we got all these different energies, right? A little bit of each, and then no one of them is being a detriment to the economy and the ecosystem, right? Because there's a balance. But if the balance is upset and we only do agavecrete or only do bamboo, then inherently those resources are extracted and abused. So I think agave could be a great additional green building material, and that's how I'm looking at it, and I hope other people start seeing its usefulness and how they could utilize it. I did construction for a lot of my life, and I know that I can utilize it in lots of ways. So we'll see where all these creative builders take agave. But if you're a builder and you want some agave to try out in whatever way or experiment you want, hit me up, and we'll try to make a small study on it, or at least some data points that we can hopefully give other people, right? It's like, say we can build some agave insulation, right? Like, say a builder comes to me and says, oh, Steve, I want to really build some agave insulation so I could try it out in this new hippies home that I'm building. Cool. Well, I could build it for him. Great. I'll probably even do it free. But I'll ask him, hey, dude, we're going to take this to a fucking lab, and we're going to be testing the R value on it so that we could get this data, right? Because if we start having R values behind agave insulation, we need these statistics to show people, oh, it's X amount stronger, or X amount cheaper, or, it's got X R value, for its cost, it's efficient or whatever, right? So builders need that stuff to make the decisions that many times are based on economics as well. So it's like agave, a lot of this fiber, they really don't give a fuck about it. The stalk, most of the times, is just tossed. We're not even allowed to come up, and the leaves are just all cut and put back into the field or fed to livestock. So great thing on the livestock, actually. But if they're just throwing them back to the field, give it to a builder very cheaply, and now they could have an affordable building material that they can make insulation from. So you're starting to see some of that in Mexico now, because there's been so much drop in the price of agave that now they're looking for all these alternate ways of utilizing it. But they're only thinking about the piña. They should be thinking about the whole fucking plant. The flower stalk and the fiber has a lot of use. But yeah, hope you learned something today about maybe how you could potentially use agave in building. But just wanted to put this out there as a primer. By no means is it all the ways that you could use agave for building, but it's just to get you thinking about how you could utilize it maybe on your farm or your homestead or your property, your home, and maybe you give it a chance. So have a great rest of the day, everyone. Agave and Cactus Talk out.